Nothing in this podcast is intended as investment advice, and the people in this podcast may hold positions in the stocks they talk about. Do not buy any investment based solely on a tip or recommendation. Please do your own research.
Hello and welcome to the Sunday Roast. It's Sunday the 10th of September and we're back from a nice summer break. Summer's finally here. Schools are back, so that large, bright, burning thing in the sky has decided to make an appearance. Well, some schools are back, I say. Those that were built with reinforced autoclaved aerated concrete or racks sadly aren't back. Glad to be back, Kev. Missed the banter in the interviews.
Yeah, no, I'm glad to be back to interview some people and stuff. It's been good fun. Summer's been good fun, but and in a way, I'm speaking to you from the US anyway, so my summer is still carrying on, to be honest, because we decided as a family we would visit the US in September to see relatives. So, yeah, I'll be working from here and kids playing with their cousins. So, yeah, we've just arrived and it's good fun.
But plans to visit any clients, cheeky little visits, or are you really going to keep?
No, I don't think so, though. I mean, I'm going to be in the vicinity of not Ben's Creek, but where Adam lives. So there's a possibility I might bump into Adam, but not really planning it, to be honest. Not really planning.
Yeah. Well, I had a bit of a breakdown in Portugal. Ironically, I managed to get away when the weather turned in the UK because we had the hottest June on record, and then July and August were complete washout. So I got a couple of weeks in Portugal at the beginning, which was good. Went on a yacht, bit of parasailing. It was a bit of an adrenaline fuel buzz. Jet skiing, which the eldest daughter absolutely loved. And then of late, I've been in some good meetings, raring to go and hoping for a bit of, a liquidity event maybe in the market to see some of these undervalued companies hopefully go pop.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we need. We need some liquidity in the market because it was sucked out before the summer. And I think during the summer, someone kept sucking, didn't they, really, basically, because many things have not significantly dropped, but, they've just, wallowed down, if you like. So I think September, as we move through it and into October, any form of liquidity is going to make things move, I think. Plus, I think good news is starting to be rewarded. We are having some good news and things are moving. So, yeah, let's hope that the last sort of 4 months of this year are going to be better than the first 8 or so because, and ultimately it's been going on. How long do you reckon we've been in a bear market now? Must be 18 months minimum.
Yeah,
maybe longer.
Minimum, yeah, I'd say that it was certainly a back end. Well, early 2022, wasn't it? So yeah, for sure, we're probably into the end of the second year. It's been a long one, but let's have a look at some of the news items this week, which have kind of piqued an interest. The interesting one, I don't know if you heard about it being in the US, was a guy called Daniel Khalif. He joined the British Army in 2019, escaped prison. Basically, he's thought to have clung to the underside of a delivery lorry to make his escape from HMP Wandsworth in London. Detectives believe he was still wearing his prison-issued cook's uniform when he slipped out of the HMP Wandsworth Category B jail on Wednesday. I mean, it's reminiscent of, it's like a real-life prison break. It's almost reminiscent of a Hollywood movie script, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's just, I don't know if you've heard of it.
No, I hadn't heard of it, but it's like the Great Escape. Good luck to him.
That's a few have said that. I mean, he's kind of being held on counter-terrorism charges, basically. But I'd say until he's been tried, they're probably best not to comment. But I think he just shows our prisons are just massively understaffed, and potentially those staff are undertrained. I mean, how it happens with the amount of surveillance and how he's not been caught 4 days on is beyond me. But yeah,
very good. No, I mean, all sorts of stories have been coming out here when I've been in the US, and it's very interesting whenever you go on your Facebook in a different country, your feed changes completely. 100%. So I've been getting all these amazing, crazy stories about different things. I mean, I don't know whether it's been in the news, this story about Obama and his past and all that sort of stuff. I'm not actually going to mention it, but it's like Tucker Carlson seems to be on my list every time I go on, and all the different things he's covering. And this song, I mean, I've actually been traveling Rich Men north of Richmond, which was the #1 hit in the US for the last couple of weeks. And we landed in Washington, and Richmond is south of Washington, and basically the story is about the politician, or the song is about the politicians and that. So we've been traveling all through that. We went through Richmond and Jamestown, where we listened to the stories of what had happened for the English when they came in 1607 and basically raped and pillaged the land and killed all the Indians and effectively took over this whole area and then started moving out. So it's been fascinating. But when I look at my Facebook when I'm in America, wow, the amount of stuff that's on it, that is crazy compared to when I'm...
It probably has already, I knows your kind of, your political sway, and it's aiming those politicians, like, you know, you might have DeSantis feed, you might have called, you know what I mean? Like, they genuinely...
Yeah.
How many times have you said, right, we need a new steam cleaner or something like that, right? And then 10 minutes later, you open up your Facebook and you see an advert for a steam cleaner, and you're thinking, this is just absolutely, you know, it's clearly listening to you. It's targeted advertising, and it's scary, really.
Yeah, no, it's scary. One of the things I realize is when I write something on my notes, like a to-do list, then I normally get those things on my feed. So if you ever need someone to look something up without it, just write notes on your note and your note pages, and then basically your Facebook will have already searched your whole phone and start giving you adverts for it. It's bizarre, completely bizarre. But anyway, one of the things I did do this summer was I went to the north coast in Egypt, which is where the Mediterranean is, and I had a guest, and his name was Callum.
So is that the cue or whatever, the segue into this week's first guest?
You should then say, that's a surprise, because our first guest today is...
Well, that's a coincidence, because a couple of guests this week. Firstly, we're joined by Callum Sommerton-CEO of Chill Brands. Welcome back, Callum.
Hi, Phil. Hi, Kevin. Good to see you.
So before we get on to the serious stuff, how's your summer been in general, Callum?
It's been really good. You know, I managed to get away, you know, a couple of times on business, but managed to enjoy ourselves while we were there. So went off to Poland. There's massive growth of the vaping market there. So managed to meet with some potential distributors and have a chat, obviously early days, and then found my way to Egypt, as I think some of our shareholders have seen. Of course, had to do the pyramids and the various bits while we were there. But again,
the old tourist attractions while you're out there, you have to do that, don't you?
Has to be
see the KFC behind the pyramids, and that's bizarre, isn't it?
It's bizarre, and I think the shocking thing is just how small the Sphinx is. But yeah, it's you know, that was very good. Obviously, went out there to identify some leads. Obviously, Kevin knows all about that, and living in the country's got a really good grasp of what the business dynamic is there. But again, I think that eventually, when the time comes, that is going to be a great market for us. Massive population, a large proportion of them are under 30, so they're right where we need them to be.
So, I mean, this recent trading update with, in your words, the Chill Zero range of nicotine-free vape products is off to a great start. Just talk us through some of these numbers and their significance, please.
Yeah, so I think it's best to look at it dividing out between the UK and the US. We've been in the US market for a little while now, building up. You know, again, I think the important thing to understand is that Chill as a brand has been relaunched. It's not the same as it was when it was its CBD products. The site doesn't look the same. The get up, the branding, the logos, aside from that CBD face logo, nothing is the same in terms of visuals. So we're a new brand. We've got a new product that is in an emerging category, nicotine-free vapor, which I'll come on to why that's emerging and how exciting it could be. But we've needed to go out and actually, you know, fight our corner and establish to retailers why they should bother stocking this product, why this is the next category in vaping. That's what we've been doing in the US. So we've established these pilot stores in Arizona, Colorado, Texas, and Florida. Been working with them to see what the sell-through rate is to customers, to check that it's actually, you know, a product market fit, to ensure that customers are going to go through and buy it, because that's the whole point, and retailers want to see that. And the results have been really, really encouraging. So we're getting these stores restocking within sort of 4 to 5 weeks. It's, you know, on a monthly cycle, and you can't really ask for much better than that with independently run convenience, because they're simply not going to come back to you more regularly than that. You know, they're increasing their order size. They want to try different flavors. They want to try the new larger puff count sizes, 1,500, 3,000. In the US, we started with a 600 puff device. So yeah, we're now in a position where we've equipped ourselves with data and we're able to start talking to major distributors. Again, we're starting with those states because we want to succeed somewhere before we try and pump it. But the key really is that we can now show them this is a product with legs. Customers want it, and you can make some great margins on this if you stock it. So those are the discussions we're having. Went to a trade show at the end of August. We've got very, very positive indications from a national smoke chain that would like to deliver those products into a good number of their corporate stores, if not their franchise stores as well. So we expect to see some traction there. But really the next stage in the United States is for us to get a distribution group on board that is the right partner for us, that's not going to scalp us on margins, but it is going to give us the scale and the weight that we need in the various states we want to launch into to get some size and some critical mass with store count, with sell-through. So that's the first set. I think then look at the UK. We've had a really great month with our retail sales team, courtesy of the vaping group. They've been pounding the streets, making introductions to independent retail stores, but also kind of category specialists. That's the kind of vaping shops that you go into. That's all they sell. Bars and nightclubs as well. That's a really interesting area, I think, because a lot of these bars and nightclubs, since smoking bans took effect, have been unable to monetize their smoking area. They now have the opportunity with Chill Zero, without the need to think about, well, we're selling a nicotine or a tobacco product, to sell a product that people typically do pick up when they're drunk or intoxicated in some way, and make a decent margin on that as well. So really interested to see how that goes in the entertainment venue category. But yeah, we're in over 120 stores now. There's an update from the RNS yesterday. That number continues to grow every day. And the story is the same here. We've been able to equip ourselves with the data that we've built with those stores, even at this early stage, to show that there is demand for the products from retailers and from customers. And we're having, again, very encouraging conversations with major retail distribution groups, buying groups, who, once they are sold and signed on the idea, will be able to deliver our product into thousands of stores and, significantly increase the order quantities that we work with. So yeah, unpacking those numbers, it's a great picture. It's still early days for us, but everything is looking, frankly, better than I'd expected to by this stage.
Yeah. So are you happy with the sort of rate of activation of additional outlets that, so far from what you've seen?
Very much so, yeah. I mean, we are now selling products in the UK in stores, in every major region, less Northern Ireland at this stage. We've got pretty much a store in every county, if not multiples of that. And that's continuing to grow. Some of the stores that we've spoken to are part of multi-store chains. These are not big guys. These are sort of, somebody who owns a vape shop and perhaps 12 to 14 more. And they've seen, the product performing in the first couple of stores that they've worked with, and they want to expand it to their full footprint. So yeah, very happy with that. I think that the rate of activity is only going to increase. Really, we're just getting started here. But to have got into 120 stores in the first 4 weeks is a great notch on our shoulders. And I think that, we can expect to see that rate pick up now, because the more doors you've opened, the more doors you'll be able to open.
Very good. All sounds very positive, Callum, especially after we had some good conversations when you were over here in Egypt about, the way forward. And also, I suppose it seems like this is the time, especially in the UK, when you talk about everybody talking about banning vapes and banning this. And a lot of this is due, obviously, to the nicotine-based stuff. And here we are with a vape that has many more puffs in it. The flavors are good. And ultimately, there's no nicotine. That doesn't mean it's completely harmless, but obviously a much safer situation. So are you finding that that's what's happening on the streets?
Yeah, it's spot on. In that, actually, people are recognizing now, customers are mindful of their nicotine intake. That's reflecting to the retailers. It's going up the chain. And a lot of retailers, as I mentioned in my comment in that RNS, are saying to us, well, there's not a great deal of options on the market right now for a quality nicotine-free device. That's our focus. That is the only vapor device that we're going to be providing. And so I think at this stage, we've really caught the wave at the right time. That is starting to swell. I think in terms of, the narratives that, ban vapes, etc., that we're hearing from the media, Well, a lot of the arguments that are made are quite nonsensical and they're very tabloid in the sense that you hear people talking about, well, we've got to ban vapes to cut smoking rates. Well, in fact, if you look at any of the nations that have tried to do that, it causes a massive resurgence in smoking rates. Australia, New Zealand, it doesn't actually work to ban the product. And all you end up doing is creating a major black market. I think I saw somewhere that effectively in Australia, something like 90% of vapes are bought on the black market based on, their prescription model is not working. People are still going to acquire these devices come what may. And I would rather they were acquiring them from, legitimate vendors when the products have been tested, they contain safe ingredients, than from a black market vendor who could be putting, who knows what in the product. So I think there's a lot to be said for just cutting through the noise, getting on with it at the moment, knowing that, we have data from major health bodies around the world that suggest not that vaping is totally safe. Nobody's arguing that, but that it is markedly safer than combustible cigarettes and combustible tobacco products. So I think we can lean on that. We can show as well that, we are providing a product that ought to help people. There is a clear need for a product that at the end of that cessation cycle, people can get down to, the habitual elements of vaping rather than using the chemical substance of nicotine and finding that they're, working their way out of addiction through that. So yeah, that is what we're seeing. There's, again, a lot of noise right now. I think personally that media furor should be directed towards properly resourcing trading standards, making sure that stores and brands are not attempting to sell to children, making sure that, stores that sell the requisite number of vapes per year, it's not very many, I think it's around £500, are providing a recycling collection bin for those products. All of the issues that you hear spoken about are resolvable. And of course, there's consumer behavior to account for. That takes time. But there's nothing that we've encountered yet that doesn't have some form of rational solution that if governments, councils, brands and retailers put their heads together, we can come up with, the right way forward.
Very good. Before, when we've had podcasts, we were talking with the vape group and they were talking about somewhere in the region of 5 million vapes per annum is, how can we put it? How did they put it? It was sort of a goal or an established brand in the UK. So how long did they plan that it was going to take to get to that point? And do you see that actually could be accelerated?
Yeah, so that was ultimately, I think described as a target for when a good brand, I think raised words, but not the best, not the worst, but a good brand reaches maturity in the UK market. And that is probably around the sort of 18 to 24 month mark, barring any kind of, mass acceleration or decline to the alternative. I think that for us, based on the feedback we've been getting, based on the traction we've built already, I don't think that it's going to take 24 months to reach that level. When we'll reach maturity depends very much on when we can sign some of these bigger deals, but that is exactly what we're working on already. It has taken less time than I could have ever hoped to, prove the model and show that the devices taste great, work great, and are something that's worthy of major retailers in the UK. So, getting to that many million unit sale number, I think is totally achievable for us. And, I think it may come sooner than any of us might expect.
Very good. So obviously, since the introduction of these basically a month ago, we've had nothing but positive feedback. Is that fair? Have you had any negative from any sources?
The vast majority of feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. I would say critique that we sometimes get is, I'd like this flavor or I'd like that flavor. And that is something, again, we can address directly through future releases of flavors. I think, this is the fruits drop that we've just done, the flavors that we've just released. But I think the drinks edit will come next. I think we're going to expand that range there. The only other thing that I would say is that there is still education to be provided on, nicotine-free vapes. One of the questions that you might get is, what's the point of a nicotine-free vape? Well, many reasons. People may want it just because they like vaping, but they don't want to take up the habit. Or it may be that they already vape, but want to curtail their nicotine use. So there's education to be done there. But the feedback we've gotten on the quality of the device and the flavors has been tremendous.
Yeah, I did some market research even in Egypt for 18 to 25-year-olds and asked quite a number of people who either vaped or didn't vape, and they were actually quite interested in vaping that when there was no nicotine involved, but they didn't want to vape with nicotine. So I think this is going to be a market around the world as well of people who want to join in this vaping trend, if you like, but don't want the effect of the nicotine on their bodies effectively.
It's the same principle as shisha, those sorts of bars. I mean, people do smoke or puff away on something almost as a social activity. And the important thing for us is making sure that we are treading the line very carefully, not causing anybody who's, trying a vape to recourse into harmful habits with tobacco through a nicotine addiction. Of course, the problem with nicotine is not that it in itself is an inherently very harmful substance, but it causes people to recourse back to harmful modalities of consuming a smoke product. So that is your combustible tobacco, etc. So yeah, I think it will be popular. There are lots of additional markets around the world that we can look to in due course. Obviously, Egypt is a very exciting one, as is the UAE. In Europe, I think, as I said in the past, we'd look to Germany and Spain once we can get our act together in terms of, local approvals, etc. But, we're on course for that. And, the major thing here is that by the time we get into those territories, I would hope that we are, if not a household name in the sort of vaping community in the UK, at least a very well regarded one. And that will support conversations in new territories.
Yeah, make it a lot easier, I'm sure. So I suppose the question on people's lips is, how the hell are you going to afford this? Because obviously you're going to have to order a huge number of vapes. The vapes that came in, I presume, are moving out of the warehouses pretty fast. So how are you going to establish this in the market with, as we talked about, even if it takes 18 months to get to 5 million, that's a lot of money and a lot of vapes. So how are you going to do it?
Yeah, it is. It's a good question because ultimately, we've got to be careful in the way that we manage cash flow. I think, a few of these major orders in will reach a point where free cash flow is in a very healthy position. And actually we can, provide without any form of support a way to expand production and to, deliver a lot of vapes very quickly to various accounts. In the meantime, we're looking at all sorts of different solutions, but the key one being, either invoice factoring, invoice discounting, and facilities that work around those terms where effectively, that you've got to place an order for a major account of a UK major retailer. They've got a good credit rating and a good reputation. They're going to pay you in 60 days. And you've got to produce the vapes 30 days before that order has been delivered. So you're looking at a 90-day window of being out of the cash. And effectively, there are lots and lots of providers that, for growing British enterprises, are willing to look at factoring and discounting deals that enable you to effectively fund those without destroying your company's cash flow. So that is, top of mind at the moment. But there are lots of solutions available to us. And really, can you ask for a better position than needing money to make money as opposed to needing money just to keep the lights on?
Yeah, it's a rather strange concept in the small cap market at the minute. But to want money to make money is what we're all after ultimately. So let's hope we can speak soon about some deals that are actually going to be signed. And I wish you luck on your continued efforts in terms of what you're doing.
Yeah, it's good to have you back on and update the market. So we normally ask this sort of slightly mundane question, your favorite roast, but on this series, I'm gonna just mix it up a little bit. So what's the best advice you've ever received, Callum?
Best advice I've ever received, I think, is to, stay totally present, but not lose sight of the bigger picture. And by that, they meant, don't sweat the small stuff. As long as you are still moving towards your ultimate goal, as long as you've got your sights on the prize, and, I suppose in Chill's case, that is a very obvious prize of selling as many bloody vapes as we can. You're going to find yourself, getting towards that target. If you can keep focused on the end goal, you'll get there. But if you get lost in the detail, make sure it's all right, but don't worry.
Yeah. Very good. And then on the opposite end of that, what's the worst advice you've ever received?
Sell CBD.
Yeah. Okay. On that note, we'll say Callum Sommerton, CEO of Chill Brands. Thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, guys. Good to speak to you.
Cheers, Cal.
So, what do you make of that, Kev? Obviously you saw Callum out in Egypt, in Cairo. You spent some time with him. What do you make? Firstly, what do you make of the trading update, and what do you think the future holds for Chill?
Yeah, the trading update was good, but I think ultimately that's the calm before the storm. To be brutally honest with you, I think there is a huge amount going in the background. Off recording, he's incredibly excited about what's happening. It's well ahead of where he thought it was going to be. And watch this space. I think there's going to be a lot happening in the next few weeks. And even just from a personal point of view, the stuff we did in Egypt, we've got to go through some regulatory hoops in Egypt, which should take about 2 months. And once they're done, then sort of the same process that can happen. And, you're selling these vapes to 100 million people, basically. So it should be quite interesting. We spoke to some distributors who can start to distribute it.
And what's demand like in that? Because obviously when I travel to these places, I see that I'd say quite a large proportion of the population, certainly the males, are very keen on tobacco smoking. You see them all there puffing away.
Yeah.
So do you think there's an uptake for is it the younger gen? What's the sort of demographics?
So it's the younger generation definitely who are taking up the vaping, and a lot of them are vaping. A high percentage of them. And everything that's available, certainly in the Middle East, is very high nicotine based. And the parents are very worried about this, and many things are happening. And parents are trying to stop and we're not talking about 10 and 12-year-olds here, we're talking about 18 to 25-year-olds who are effectively not smoking, but they're vaping high levels of nicotine.
Yeah.
So I did start to ask quite a few, and have asked quite a few of that age group, would they be interested in vaping if it was just a flavor, no nicotine? And the majority would have said yes. A few said, no, I want the nicotine because I'm addicted to it, obviously. Right. But a large proportion of them said, yeah, I'd be very interested in that, So, and there's many other different avenues, like the shops where everybody does the hookah anyway, that you can have systems that go in there where there can be non-nicotine as well. So, yeah, it was very exciting. Obviously, that's a bit of a recap on the Middle East, but I think the UK is about to explode because everything seems to be in the right situation, as we said in the interview. The US, I think, is also not necessarily going to be exploding, but I think it's really going to get some traction. And then you've got the Middle East coming probably realistically early next year. And Callum's also working on Europe as well. So, I mean, the chances of them selling millions of these things, I think, is very likely. It's becoming more and more and more likely the more I see what's happening.
And on to our second guest this week. We're joined by Oliver Friesen-CEO of Golden Metal Resources. Welcome back, Oliver. How's life?
Yeah, things are good, Phil. And Kevin, good to speak to you guys again. It was a good end of summer, but we're looking forward to September and typically what's a much busier season for the junior resource space. So exciting times ahead.
Yeah, very good. I mean, obviously, since we last talked, there's been a few announcements, but let's just wind back to sort of the first day of dealings. I think it was the 10th of May we alluded to. And just how do you feel things are going in terms of, news announcements and progress being made with the company's assets?
Yeah, of course. So, as you mentioned there, we listed on May 10th, which is about 4 months ago, I believe. And what we've actually put out is a letter to shareholders. We released that a few days ago, and I encourage listeners to have a quick read of that. The reason we put that out was just to sort of highlight and recap everything that we've accomplished. Now, obviously, listing May 10th and until today, which is September, or we're in September now, that's all during kind of the summer months. So a lot of that really exciting and material news that we put out ultimately was put out into what is typically a pretty quiet time in the market when a lot of people are away on vacation. So it was really important that we highlighted and sort of just reiterated all the exciting stuff that we were able to accomplish, all those very material news releases. So that's all kind of covered in the letter to shareholders. But just a few kind of highlights since our list, one of them being an offtake agreement that we signed with the largest tungsten processing company in the United States of America. That's obviously a very significant move because we're looking to create almost a circular chain for tungsten. That is where hopefully will be the person who mines tungsten at our 100% owned Pilot Mountain project. And then with GTP being an offtake partner, we can send the concentrate directly to them who are located in Pennsylvania with that tungsten then entering directly into the US supply chain. So that's a really exciting development for us. A bit more recently, we were able to acquire a very exciting lithium property, which actually is, funny enough, not too far down the road from our flagship Pilot Mountain project. So we're going to work on getting some more news out on that and some details of the technical review we're doing there. On top of that, we also recently signed an MOU with a nuclear fusion company. So we'll certainly be talking about that more in the future. The reason people should be excited about that is this nuclear fusion technology, if you're aware of it, is something that's sort of gaining a lot of steam right now. What a lot of people don't understand is how much tungsten is going to be required to effectively line these fusion reactors. And some of the numbers that I've been given so far in terms of the actual volume needed compared to the total annual consumption of tungsten are pretty mind-blowing. So lots been going on across the business, but as mentioned, September and October, November into 2024, this is typically a busy time for the junior resource space. We've been very active behind the scenes and during the month of August, getting a lot of things ready. So we're going to have a lot of news to talk about over the coming months here, and things are certainly looking exciting in the resource space as well. So a lot to look forward to.
Yeah, very good. I think there was also an announcement that Form 211 had been cleared with the US broker-dealer regulator with a view of joining the OTCQB venture market. Just talk us through the sort of rationale behind allowing US-based investors to invest in the company going forward.
Yeah, so Phil, I was in the US about a month and a half ago. I was in Boca Raton for the Rick Rule Symposium. And there at that conference is pretty much the who's who of people in the resource space, specifically within the American resource space. So obviously had a lot of really interesting conversations there about golden metal resources. And as you can imagine, and as listeners are probably well aware and acutely aware, United States citizens are typically very patriotic people. They love their country and they think it's one of the greatest countries in the world, which it certainly is. Using a lot of different metrics. But the important thing is, we kind of we started talking about golden metal resources and what we're doing, specifically because we are a Nevada-focused company. And our kind of main thesis here is the fact that, first of all, we own the largest undeveloped tungsten deposit in the United States of America. The United States currently has no domestic primary production of tungsten. And most importantly, the biggest import partner for the U.S. right now is China. So those three kind of facts, stuck together obviously makes a very compelling story. And what we're looking to do with some of our partners, including GTP, is be essentially the sole producer of tungsten in the U.S. Another important note is that a lot of tungsten makes its way into the Department of Defense for military purposes. So that story, even just a quick conversation where I kind of highlight those main points to U.S. investors, they really perked up. And it was a story that really, really resonated with everyone I spoke to. Some of the feedback was just overwhelmingly positive. And that kind of just kicked things into motion. It was already in the back of our mind that, we're very much a U.S.-focused company and our story is very U.S.-focused. But a lot of these investors were saying, hey, how can I get involved? How can I get exposure to what you guys are doing? So sure enough, shortly after that, we really kicked things into motion to get this OTC listing moving forward, which will make it a lot easier for U.S. investors to get exposure to what we're doing. So we've cleared the first hurdle, which is a very positive step. The more exciting step is about 3 to 4 weeks away once we get the full OTCQB listing complete. So that will mean that pretty much every American who has a trading account can very easily invest in golden metal resources. So I think it's a really important part of what we're doing here now. Obviously, if we can open up this story and our business to the U.S. investors, which is a massive group of people with a lot of money, and on top of that, oftentimes they're very long-term holders. So we're looking forward to get that listing live and letting the U.S. Take part in what we're doing here.
So did it, presumably from that visit you made, did the investors express an interest in sort of like, how can I invest in the company? And that prompted you then to try and file for the, for OTCQB?
Yeah, it was always in the back of our mind that OTC was something that we're going to want to pursue at some point. But just the feedback from those conversations really got us moving. We said, okay, we got to move this up the list. We got to get this happening very quickly. A lot of them were saying, hey, how can I invest right now? Because if you do have a full service broker in the US, you can get access to UK listed companies. But it's just too many sort of hurdles and, blockers in place for that to really commercialize it. So we said, let's just get an OTC listing. Let's get that process started and complete. And that way it just completely opens us up. And anyone who is interested can very easily get access to and invest in what we're doing.
Yeah, let's go back to the fusion tech company and everything that you mentioned at the start, and I believe that there's private investments of over something like $6.2 billion that are being made in the fusion industry, and we're seeing also governments joining the race for commercial fusion power. Just talk us through why it's important and how the role that tungsten plays within that radiation shielding, basically.
Yeah, of course. So I think the first point you made is a really important one, because just for listeners to understand the amount of money that's being deployed into this industry. I mean, it's not like it's some sort of, obscure small part of the market. I mean, the US specifically is putting billions and billions of dollars into this technology, because the reality is, if it's perfected, I mean, it's a near limitless source of carbon-free energy for the future. So it's something that's very important for the future of the world, really. And the U.S. is at the forefront of this movement. They're looking to secure and be the kind of the world leaders in terms of making breakthroughs in this technology. However, oftentimes, as most listeners are aware, governments can be a bit short-sighted in terms of the supply chains towards some of these really important technologies. So tungsten's no different. As mentioned, $6+ billion is going into this industry. But no one's really talking about the supply chain and the metals that actually you need to input into this technology to make it commercial. So with Oxford Sigma, which is actually a UK-based company, we're partnering together to really just raise awareness for the US and other governments to start to take note as to the volume of tungsten that's going to be required within this industry. So it's great to invest in the technology and obviously get that moving along. But once the technology is perfected or starts to make some really positive strides, the actual question will be, okay, well, do we have the metals to actually make this work? And currently the answer is no. The amount of tungsten that's needed, and the reason that tungsten is so important is because these reactions are so hot. I mean, they're essentially just trying to recreate the reaction that happens in the sun. The only metal that's been proven to be able to actually contain these reactions is essentially a massive, almost pure block of tungsten because of its really high melting point. So this fact alone is what we're really trying to get across to just general investors, but I think more importantly to the government here, to say, hey, this technology is really important, but it's time we invest in the supply chain. And so with Oxford Sigma, we're looking to get that awareness up and start to have conversations with the decision makers in the US and abroad to say, hey, we're working on the tungsten supply chain. How can you support us? Which ultimately will allow us to support this technology going forward. So a lot of really exciting developments there. We're going to be doing some interviews and putting out some more information about what this partnership looks like. But more importantly, what are the numbers? How much tungsten is needed in these reactors, and what does that mean for the future of demand and pricing ultimately for tungsten as we move forward and this technology continues to make positive strides?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they must be very serious about this collaboration, because I think they've also done a partnership or a collab with, is it Tungsten West, the UK-based company as well, so the same company. So it's obviously about shoring up critical supplies, right?
100%. No, you nailed it, right? So they're on the forefront of the actual metallurgy when it comes to this technology. That's kind of their specialty. So they're kind of raising the red flag and saying, guys, we don't have enough tungsten. This is not going to work unless we start to look into these supply chains now. So Tungsten West, obviously a UK company with a UK property, whereas we are a US or UK based company, but with a US property. And as mentioned, the United States is probably one of the world leaders in investing in this space. So it's very important that a tungsten supply in the U.S. is ultimately secured here to boost and fund this industry in the U.S. going forward.
So, Oliver, how much tungsten is in your property that you can say this has been JORC reported, this is how much you have?
Yeah, so Kev, it is the largest undeveloped tungsten resource in the U.S. right now. So we have 12.53 million tons at approximately 0.27% tungsten trioxide. So that number equates to the largest tungsten resource in the U.S. right now. As I think we've touched on previous pods, but I also just encourage listeners to look at some of the other news we put out on Pilot Mountain. But there's also significant exploration story here. So while we right now have a very strategic in-ground resource, which is worth a lot of sort of money in situ, and it's the largest in the U.S., I think there's a massive opportunity to also very significantly increase the amount of tungsten we have in the ground. So that's another important part of what we're doing here at Gold Medal, is that exploration story and pushing that forward.
Yeah, so we have this amount of tungsten available in the ground, and obviously it has to be mined and taken out of the ground and then processed. But how many more factors of opportunities are there around Pilot Mountain?
Well, in terms of other metals, so tungsten is the main metal that we're focused on. But the great thing about Pilot Mountain compared to a lot of other tungsten deposits is we have very significant copper, silver, and zinc credits. So when you combine those all together, and anyone can do these equations, but it's about 0.5% tungsten trioxide. So ultimately, when you actually sit down to work out the economics on a project like this, those other metals, they're all recoverable. And just further boost the economics of this project. On top of that, one thing that we've talked about just briefly, but we're looking more into this now, is there's a very significant garnet resource at Pilot Mountain as well. So we're looking at the commercial scaling of that. But when you take it all together, tungsten is the most important metal here, but all these other metals that we're able to produce or would be produced if this project got into production will just further improve the economics of this asset going forward. So they're all really important factors, and we're looking into all those at the moment right now.
But what I'm also getting at is the exploration upside. So in other words, how much more tungsten could be available at Pilot Mountain other than the JORC reported stuff that's already there?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question ultimately. So the previous operator put out an actual technical report that was signed off by geologists, and they were looking specifically at the exploration upside. And the number that they came up with was, and I'll have to look at the numbers again just to make sure, but it was between 2 to 3x what is currently in the ground right now. That was sort of their low end target was about 2x what we have right now. And then their high end target was 3x. So that kind of gives you a bit of a range, but I mean, either of those outcomes are pretty significant. And that was all done before we did the IP survey back late 2022, early 2023, and we've put out those results. But on top of those targets that they were focused on, which came up with 2 to 3x the current in-ground resource, we've also found 5 additional geophysical targets that have very similar characteristics to some of the main deposits at Pilot Mountain right now. So those are not included in the kind of the 2 to 3x uplift that they postulated back about 2018. So when you factor that into what is already known, I think it becomes very clear how big this exploration story could get once we really kind of keep pushing this forward and looking at some of these new targets that have been identified.
Yeah, and I hope it's more than $1 million question, because it needs to be more than $1 million.
Sorry, $1 billion question.
It needs to be 100 million or 1 billion, as you say, not $1 million question. $1 million question is not going to get anybody interested.
Yeah, sorry. That's a good point. I think that's just $1 million question is the same for every day, but not for the mining industry. It should be billion or $10 billion question. That's a good point.
I think there has been acknowledgement of this in the market over the summer, because we've seen many prices drift, and your price at the minute is actually gone up from when it was launched on May the 10th. So, the upside is there, and obviously people see it. And also, I was quite sort of pleasantly surprised about the fact that you got your boots on and actually stuck some sticks in the ground to go and stake out this lithium. So from the perspective of what's already been announced, how excited are you about the lithium?
Yeah, well, I guess just firstly there, Kevin, I think you made a good point there. I think that the share price has held up very well since list in what was a pretty quiet and crummy time in the market. And I think one of the reasons for that is, and it's just important to highlight, is the share structure. I think we have probably one of the best share structures in the UK markets. Over 70% of our stock is held by essentially 3 people, including London listed Power Metal Resources, which has about 63%, and then 2 high net worths have about another 10%. So very low free float, which I think is what has allowed us to maintain our share price post list here. And I think things are moving in the right direction now, which is probably a result of not only the news that we're putting out, but also just the underlying share structure, which is obviously so important in this space. But when it comes to the lithium specifically, lithium is always something that I've been very interested in, especially in the last few years here, specifically in Nevada. I mean, Nevada is one of the best jurisdictions in the world for lithium exploration, and specifically what are called lithium brines. So these are some of the deposits that you find down in South America, like in Chile and Argentina, and these are the largest deposits in the world. And sure enough, there's sort of a lithium triangle, as they call it, in Nevada, where some of these very large lithium brine deposits are being found. And sure enough, Pilot Mountain falls very close within that lithium triangle. So it was on my radar, and you know, when I was on the property a few months ago, I was looking down into the basin, funny enough, and there's this very, very large Playa Lake. So it's a big kind of white, dried out lake. I mean, it was massive, but if you look down in the valley, you could see it. And it kind of got me thinking, okay, well, typically Playa Lakes are associated with lithium mineralization, oftentimes, especially in Nevada. So as soon as I got home, I started doing some digging, and sure enough, there was, first of all, it was proven to be a lithium basin, but more importantly, there was some ground that had recently become available. And so we obviously very quickly moved to secure that ground. And that was a great outcome because, you know, to actually just stake a property instead of acquire it from someone else, I mean, you do it for pennies on the dollar. And on top of that, you own it 100% outright with no royalties or encumbrances or anything like that. So we're very, very low cost. We're able to acquire what's a very significant footprint in this lithium basin, which is part of this lithium triangle in Nevada. So, and on top of that, as I mentioned, when I was on Pilot Mountain, I could see it. So in terms of the synergies as we push these projects forward, from an exploration perspective, I mean, it's an absolute dream. I can drive from one to the other in probably about 10 minutes along really well-maintained roads. So when you kind of add all those factors together, I think it was a very significant development for the company. And we're looking to get out some more news on that in terms of the actual data, underlying data we've been able to procure. But it's a very important one because lithium is something that a lot of investors want exposure to, as they should. I think we all know where lithium is going here, and there's going to be massive shortages in the future. So it's one I think investors want to get exposure to. And now with KB Basin in the portfolio, we're really happy with that exposure that we can give our investors.
Yep, sounds good. We'll wait for our invite in the post to come and see the thing on the ground, put some boots on the ground. That will be very interesting. But I think going forward over the next few months, how well informed, if you like, are the investors going to be? What sort of information are they going to receive sort of between now and Christmas?
Yeah, so I think that the first kind of 3 months since list should give investors an indication as to how quickly we move as a business and how oftentimes we communicate to the market. You know, a lot of companies, you won't hear from them 2-3 months at a time. That's not our thesis at all. On top of that, we're just pushing so many aspects of our business forward at one time that we do need to get this news out to the market. So I think we were going about one RNS a week for the first couple of months there, which just showed the pace at which the business was moving. And that pace hasn't slowed down. So a lot of the news that, we've been kind of talking about in the background, some of the things that we've been working on or alluded to, will start to work their way to the market here. So it's going to be a very busy season for us. As mentioned, August, we were very busy behind the scenes, getting a lot of different exploration programs and commercial things moving and pushed forward. So that's going to all start to make its way to the market. And I think the last 3-4 months should just be an indication to listeners as to what and how often we're going to communicate and push things forward, and the pace ultimately that we push things forward for the next couple months here and the remainder of 2023 and into 2024 and beyond.
Just so people have a grasp. I mean, we're not asking for any sort of understanding of valuations or anything, but how much, if you manage to get 2-3 times the amount of titanium that's in the ground, how much is that titanium worth on the market? Now, obviously, it has to be paid for to get it out of the ground and all of those different things. But what magnitude are we talking about?
First of all, Kev, tungsten, a little tongue slip there, but that's okay. So in terms of what
did I say?
You said titanium, but that's okay. They sound very similar. I mean, in terms of magnitude, like you said, there's so many factors that need to be considered when you look at the economics of these deposits. One thing I can say, I mean, anyone, if they wanted to, could go to our website and look at the in situ metal value of what we have right now at Pilot Mountain based on the contained metal. I mean, anyone can do this calculation based on the current spot prices. It works out to $1.5 billion in situ of metal value. So, like I said, this is not some number that isn't disclosed to the market. Anyone can do this calculation if they want. So to answer your question, I mean, if you 2x or 3x that obviously would equate to that $1.5 billion going up by 2 or 3x. These are just very simple rudimentary calculations, but just to give a bit of a steer as to what this could look like. Obviously, a lot of work needs to be done to, first of all, prove up those additional resources. And on top of that, the actual economics will depend on lots of other factors, which we're looking at understanding better. But just to give sort of a rough steer as to what this all looks like and what it could all be worth from an in situ metal point, that kind of hopefully will help listeners.
Yeah, and I mean, if you even worked on a 10 to 15% margin on that, you're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, you could use a lot of different margins. Like I said, there's a lot more work that has to happen here, and that's one of the things that we're focused on is answering a lot of these questions. I think our broker put out a price target as well on a research note, which went into a bit more depth as to how you could value what we have in the ground right now. And they came up with a price target right now of about 35 pence. So I encourage listeners to have a quick read of that, because I think it breaks down in a bit more detail how you could go about evaluating that. Then obviously, as we continue to grow the resources at Pilot Mountain, those numbers obviously get larger. But yeah, it's a good way to kind of just get a rough idea as to what this could all be worth. Listeners are maybe aware, or if you look at our share price now, we're sub 10 million pound market cap. So I think there's a lot of potential here. And as we push this business forward and unlock value at Pilot Mountain, as well as Kibby and the other assets, I think there's obviously a lot to look forward to with what we're doing here.
Yep, that's great. And we look forward to speaking to you in the days and weeks ahead as we move forward with all of these different projects.
Yeah, before you go, I mean, last time we had a bit of the funny reaction. We asked you about the midweek takeaway, and I think you pulled it together with a really cracking answer. We meant the food, but I'm going to mix it up for this new series of the roast. I'm going to ask you, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Oh, that's a good one. Best advice I've ever received.
Don't eat that.
Oh, Phil, that's a good question. You really caught me off guard with that one.
Yeah, I mean, it could be life. It could be a routine you have. It could be something in business. You're a CEO. You know, there must be a mantra that you sort of always come back to.
Yeah, I mean, I think being a CEO of a publicly traded company, one thing that's always kind of resonated with me and other people that I've spoken to is just to have thick skin and keep your head down. There's a lot of kind of daily bumps and things like that in the road, and certain investors can kind of get on you about certain things. But, I have a really long-term vision here at Golden Metal Resources. I see where the puck's going. I see what this could all be worth in a year, 2 years' time. So one thing that I always try to remind myself is not to get bogged down by the little day-to-day fluctuations and really just stay focused on the long-term goals here. And that's what I'm ultimately doing, because I know that if I focus on the long-term goals, the value of this business will be a lot more tomorrow or in a year or 2 years from now than what it is today. And if there's small little bumps in the road or little, fluctuations in share price, like for instance, when we dropped a little bit off the IPO, I see where this business is going. I know what this can be worth. So just staying true to what we're doing here and just look long-term and not get bogged down by the day-to-day. I think that'd probably be advice that's been really helpful for me in this sector. Absolutely.
Very good. Well, we thank you for coming on, and obviously well done on the progress you've made since the listing. And we'll just say, Oliver Friesen-CEO of Golden Metal Resources, thanks very much for your time.
Yeah, thanks, gents.
So what do you make of Golden Metal Resources, Kev, going forward, and obviously since their listing in May?
Well, my first comment is I'm very, very, very impressed with Oliver. He's very on the ball. He knows what he's doing, and he also knows how to communicate to the market extremely well. Obviously, he's a geologist and also knows, the game, if you like. So feel very confident that, we're in good hands in terms of our investments in Golden Metal Resources. And I suppose the second point is, and he pointed out, it's very tightly held. So if it's very tightly held, I think the first port of call is going to be the broker note at 35p, going to value it at 20-30 million pounds. I think it will. And I don't think that's a million miles away. I mean, based on all the different things that are happening and the news flow that he expects over the next period of time, and the US government basically, almost certainly going to help them fund it, if not fund it. Yeah, it's not your traditional miner, hoping to hit some tungsten. It's there, and they've also got lithium and gold. So yeah, I wouldn't say excited, but I think it's got an extremely good chance of doing well.
Yeah, I think with that collaboration with Oxford, I think that it looks very promising. And as you say, that I think Oliver pretty much does downplay the scale of how big it really could be. Is my observation from what from the interviews we've done, really, and looking at the recent presentation, with the new assets and the latest news release, it looks very exciting. So definitely one to keep on the radar. Let's have a look at some movers in the last 2 months, because obviously it's been kind of like 40 trading days since we've been on. I think the best mover, if I sort by 40-day return total on the whole market, ITS has done 591%, so that's nearly a six-bagger, which is phenomenal really in this current climate. Market cap still of only like 0.2 million, which is 200,000. So how on earth whatever it started at, I don't know how it got so low, but wow. What else? Long Life AI 400%, Plexus Holdings 400, Upland Resources, UPL had a really good run. I think they were up about 500%. They've dropped back to about 340. Beacon Energy, BCE is another move at 200%. So Mode Global, we talked about them. I think at the end of the roast, for some reason they came back to market. Jonathan Rowland's kind of like online banking app, Challenger Bank, crypto, doing very well. The one RNS we had in the last couple of weeks, which really stood out, was Power Metal Resources. They unveiled a substantial helium anomaly at the Perch River uranium project in Canada's Athabasca Basin. Data analysis detected multiple helium anomalies, including a notably strong one at the project center. So unbelievable result, really. I don't know what they were expecting, but certainly the sampling they did showed that it was an exciting find, really.
Yeah. No, I mean, there hasn't been much action really over the summer as far as I can see. There have been a few things that have gone off, but ultimately they've been very small capitalization companies that have done very well. So we're dying for liquidity. We will wait to review our positions at the end of this month, which will be the end of the third quarter. But hasten to say that we haven't had the best summer from when we stopped. But the potential upside in some of these stocks, I think, is big. You know, it really is big. I think the chances of doubling, trebling, and more your money in quite a few of these stocks once liquidity returns, I think is pretty high. You know, and you can list any of them that you think. I think Chill's going to have a great chance to do very well. I think another one, as we've already mentioned, that have been on today, is Golden Metal Resources. You've got Galileo, which has got huge numbers of assets going on there and lots of different things happening, and yet still a small market capitalization.
Yeah.
I mean, you could go on and on and on, I think, in terms of, there's potential. And I say, as Colin Bird said in one of his interviews before the summer, it was basically, we need a liquidity event. We need something that's really worth 100 million, 200 million, and all of a sudden people make big money, and then that's going to get poured into the market.
That's the snowball, isn't it? If you need to get back to the days when you're seeing 3, 4, 5 stocks doing 100, 200%, and then once you get that money coming out, you get a liquidity event and a snowball where they're taking profit from one and then they're going into the next stock and the next one, and not just pump and dump type stuff, but genuinely moving more money in, generating profits, moving those profits into other stocks, and then and that's all you need, is that start of that snowball liquidity event. Really good quote from Paul Johnson, ex Power Metals, said on Twitter, or X as it's now known: prepare yourself in the coming weeks for a lot of investors bemoaning why they sold when they didn't have to various juniors just prior to a 200 to 300% rise. One mode of preparation is for you to buy the shares from the sellers, so smoothing their pathway out.
I hope he's right. Let's put it that way. I hope he's right, because I'm sitting patiently with many of these resource stocks and saying to myself, well, they are worth much more. They are. Now, whether somebody's willing to pay it is the issue, isn't it? And that's where we sit. And as we progress and have these conversations with CEOs over the next few months, let's hope we're in a better position come Christmas time. And not only that, it makes everybody just feel a bit better, because everybody's bloody miserable and everybody's trying to stab everybody else in the back in terms of the boards and everything else, because the share prices are so miserable and people have lost money. But they've only lost money if they sell, and that's
the reality of
it. That's your man's Warren's comment, isn't it? It says you only lose money if you sell a stock, and ultimately, if you've had the nerve to hold on and maybe even add to basically reduce your averages, then you're going to be in a very good position, I think, going forward with a lot of these stocks, a lot, not just ones we've covered. There's a whole multitude of stocks out there that I expect will do extremely well.
Yeah. You find out a lot about yourself and others in these extreme sector lows, though, don't you? Do you know what I mean? It tests your mettle, that's for sure. And it tests a lot of it. And I think, as you say, people's emotions run absolutely crazy. But I think there's a lot of investors who don't see the long game, do they? They can't see past the end of the week or the end of summer.
Yeah, well, I mean, the market has become a bit of a trader's market, hasn't it, over the last while? And by necessity, if you like, if you wanted to make money in the market in the last 18 months, as we said earlier in the podcast, you had to, you've probably had to trade. But the ones that haven't traded and have basically just been lowering their averages and building up positions in certain stocks, then those guys are going to be sitting there going, no, I'm definitely not selling now. It's doubled and I'm not selling now, and it's trebled and I'm not selling now, because they've been waiting a long time and they can now see the value. And as usual, most of these things do what? They swing too far one way and then they swing too far the other way as well.
Yeah.
So
there's no middle ground with a lot of them.
When is that going to be that they swing too far the other way and there's going to be huge profits made? And, are you going to be there ready to, take them out? Who knows? We will see as time goes by.
So on Friday, the stock markets in London closed higher. FTSE 100 rose. It's only about 0.5% to 7,478, and the 250 gained about 0.4%. And then the AIM All share rose 1.1%. So as we've just been talking, that's quite promising for the small cap space. I think it was 743 points. Obviously, sentiment has been driven or risen based on the fact that there's talk of the UK interest rates might soon be at a peak. Maybe now there might be another 0.25 point rise, but certainly the Bank of England, there is governor is kind of insinuating with his dovish comments, Andrew Bailey, saying that potentially we're at the peak, so at the end of the interest rate hikes, which is obviously promising for those homeowners who have been absolutely squeezed. Pound remained weak. I think the dollar has actually been really, really strong, hasn't it? It's lost a bit of strength in the last few sessions, but has been really, really strong over the last kind of few weeks.
Yeah, the dollar hit 105 against a basket of currencies, and it had gone down to 99 at the beginning of the summer. So it's had a very strong summer, and yet the U.S. economy is in not good condition at all. So you tell me why. And the S&P 500 VIX, which is basically the signs of volatility in the market, is, I think, at a 52-week low, or close to a 52-week low. It was at a 52-week low a couple of weeks ago. Now it's just popped up a little bit, but it's when you've heard us talking about that, when volatility's been high, last September, volatility was at 34, 35. Now it's at 13 or 14. So you can see this basically means that they don't think there's going to be huge sways and huge movements. Doesn't mean it won't happen and it can't pick up quickly, but this is a good sign for the markets normally if the volatility is fairly low. And the FTSE's picking back up as well again. I mean, when you look at the FTSE, it's moved back up.
Nearly around 7,500, which is good.
Yeah. It had gone down to 7.2, I think, and then picked back up again and then come back up again. And it's done that for most of this year. But we've still moved from this time last year, we were at 6.8 something, and now we're at 7.4, 7.5. And
you can thank Marks and Spencer's for moving back into the FTSE 100 for that.
Yeah, I would imagine. Hopefully, it's going to head towards the 8,000, especially if there's a big pickup in the miners again with all of this talk that we have about resources. Yeah. But let's see what happens. Again, thanks for listening, everybody. And we look forward to bringing you more interviews with the CEOs and throughout the weeks, and listening to this podcast on a Sunday where we bring a bit of a chat on what's happening in the market.
Yeah, if you're listening on Spotify or YouTube, hit the bell icon, subscribe for notifications, or wherever else you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening.
This podcast was brought to you by Roast PR Limited. If you would like to appear on a future episode of The Sunday Roast, please email admin@thesundayroast.net